Amanda felt rather silly waiting for her ex-boyfriend at the spaceport. He was always the one that got away. Their time together had been the best of her life, and then it came to abrupt end when Sarek had to return to Vulcan for some personal business. It had bothered her a little that he never told her what it was, but she got over it when she realized that it was tearing him apart to leave her. During those last few days he had gazed at her so wistfully that if he hadn't been Vulcan she would have sworn that he was close to tears. He touched her tenderly and held her as if he were trying to memorize the feel of her. Then he left her at the spaceport. Amanda spent so many sleepless nights thinking of him. It was only after they parted that she realized how deeply she had fallen in love with Sarek. His absence had been a shock at first, and she kept expecting to see him, making a mental list of things she was going to tell him. Before, their almost daily communications had never been enough, always over too soon. Even now, nearly 2 years later, she almost felt a physical pain each time she thought of him. Amanda had felt incomplete, as if Sarek had taken half of her broken heart with him to Vulcan. The sad memories fled from her mind when she saw him exit the transport. Her heart felt like it was trying to leap out of her chest. Sarek was back! She had planned to hail him formally with the ta'al and the Vulcan greeting that she had been practicing, but to hell with that! Amanda ran towards Sarek and threw herself at him. She clung to him and felt his arms wrap around her, holding her just as tightly. After a few moments he released one of his hands and touched her face. She realized then that she was crying. She was so happy to see him. He stared at her, mesmerized as he caressed her cheek, wiping away her tears and touching her as if making sure she was real. He tilted her chin up and bent down, bringing his lips to hers. He kissed her with abandon in front of the whole world, and Amanda didn't care. She returned the kiss with fervor, ignoring the stares she was sure they were getting. When they pulled apart to breathe, he stroked her face again. If his eyes were a little bit shiny and his face not quite so stoic, well, Amanda wouldn't say anything. She grinned as she pulled him away from the crowd to her transport. Having Amanda at his side again felt surreal. He gripped her hand, reluctant to lose contact with her. Sarek could not get enough of her mind, which seemed to have become so much brighter in his absence. Before, he had thought her mind was like a supernova, but now it was like witnessing several stars being born out of its remnants. Each thought was breathtaking in its beauty, and he constantly looked down at her in wonder. That first night, they spent hours in each other's arms talking. They fell into easy conversation as if they had never been apart. However, the way they clung to each other indicated just how keenly they both remembered their painful separation, and neither desired to repeat the experience ever again. Amanda fell asleep against Sarek's chest while he was still talking, and he could not be bothered to see the logic of waking her up. He spent the rest of the night watching over her and touching her hair to make sure that she would not illogically disappear. Meditation could not bring the same peace that gazing down at Amanda gave him. He knew that it would not be easy to be together. However, that night reminded him of how important she was to him. In the morning, he knew that they could face their worlds together. "You would ask me for permission to bond with an outworlder, Sarek?" T'Pau asked with a peaked brow. "It is not the Vulcan way." Sarek considered how best to answer her. There was no room in the Vulcan way for a marriage of preference. He could argue how well matched Amanda was to him intellectually, how she challenged his preconceptions, inspired him to grow beyond what he was, to become a better version of himself. He could argue that his time with her had made him understand the nature of his people more clearly. His respect for the Vulcan way was greater because of their association. He could make all these arguments and more, but it would not be the truth. Sarek was marrying Amanda for love, and that was a reason he knew T'Pau could not accept. "As ambassador to Earth, it is my duty to observe and understand human behavior. Marrying Miss Grayson is logical," Sarek explained, bringing his eyes to T'Pau's. "I am not requesting your permission. I am merely making you aware of my intentions." T'Pau's eyes widened. "You would take this Coman as wife against your family's wishes?" Sarek kept his gaze steady. "If I must." "Marry her the human way, then." T'Pau gave him an indifferent wave of her hand. "But know that your bond with her will not be ratified on Vulcan. She will not have a place among us." Sarek found that unacceptable. He was determined that Amanda be given her full rights as his wife. "For one who helped bring the true teachings of Sarek to our people," he replied in an even tone, "you are intimately aware of his most basic precept, infinite diversity in infinite combinations. You must concede that accepting Amanda Grayson as my wife is in accordance with the Vulcan way." T'Pau's lips became a thin line, and Sarek knew he had won the argument. The ground was hard and warm underneath Amanda as she knelt across from Sarek. Her heart fluttered as he brought his right hand toward her, his first 2 fingers extended. She hesitated only a few seconds before mimicking the gesture. She didn't know why she felt so nervous. They had already been married on Earth in a wedding large enough to make the media happy. The ceremony on Vulcan was to be a quiet affair with only their immediate families in attendance, and yet somehow she found it more nerve-wracking. When she touched her fingers to his, she felt his affection for her seep through the contact, and she blushed. "There is still time for you to declare Kalifarr if you are having second thoughts," Sarek murmured, his brow quirked in the way that meant he was teasing. "However, I would ask that you choose a champion that I could easily best." Amanda laughed, and Sarek's amusement buzzed against her fingertips. "I declare Kalifarr, beloved," she whispered, "for now and always." Her heart swelled as they looked at each other. The aged priestess stepped forward and spoke. "What you are about to see comes down from the time of the beginning," she said in Sarek's native tongue. "This is the Vulcan heart. This is the Vulcan soul. This is our way." She placed her fingers against Amanda's cheek and temple and did the same for Sarek. Suddenly the gentle hum of Sarek's presence became amplified 100-fold. She was overwhelmed by the color of his passion, the fire of his desire, the vice-like grip of his possessiveness, and the brilliant light of his love. He had told her that for his people emotions run deep underneath the calm of logic, but his warning now seemed like the understatement of the century. It is too much. When she heard his words in her mind, Amanda realized that she was weeping. She felt him begin to withdraw. No! She wasn't sure if she'd sent the word across their newly formed bond or spoken it out loud. She reached for Sarek's mind and drew him back. "Your love is the greatest gift you could ever give me, husband." Amanda laughed once more as she was swept away in the swell of their shared joy.